Good afternoon to you out there. It is Sunday. It is February 8th. It's about 3:24 right now in the afternoon. New Jersey's in the middle of an ice storm, cold snap this season. It's been I kind of like it because I like my cold in the winter and my hot in the summer and all four seasons like New Jersey can give you. But we got nowhere to go. Might as well do this, right? It is also Super Bowl Sunday, but that doesn't happen for another 2 hours or so I have plenty of time to kick back and talk to you today. I've been getting over being unwell, so hopefully I don't have to clear my throat too much, but if I do, I apologize in advance. It's just a thing I might need to do. But today, what are we talking about today? Today we're talking about a book by John Nolan called Confidential. Uncover your competitors' top business secrets legally and quickly, and protect your own. It's published by Harper Business. Now, just a few book reviews ago, I talked about a book called Crystallizing Public Opinion by Edward Bernays. That was episode 79, if you'd like to check it out. And I'm going to put up the cover for it here just so you can see what it looks like. And in the beginning of that review, I spoke of where I heard about that book initially. It seems to be, interestingly enough, the exact same place I heard about this book, which is why I'm doing this one as well. My discussion was when I learned about a man by the name of Chase Hughes. And since then, I've been reading even his own book. I think I've passed around the 500-page mark of that one. It's an 800-page book, so I'm 5/8 of the way there. But by seeing Chase Hughes do podcasts and talk the way he talks, he mentioned the Bernays book and why it was important. He even mentioned this book. So now I've completed both of these. I have the other review, I have this review, and soon enough I will have Chase Hughes' review as well. And this has been my favorite topic so far in the last 5 months. Essentially, we are talking about human behavior. We're talking about influence, persuasion, elicitation, which I'll get into in a minute, even some hypnotism from time to time. Just everything out there that would let you read someone else, or ways in which you can manipulate someone else. But most importantly, the topic is on how you can see if someone's trying to use a method against you and what you can do to fight against that. So essentially, along with everything that Chase Hughes discusses, he lifted and admires what John Nolan has put in this book. And that, here, I'm going to discuss with you now. I bought this one actually last summer. In retrospect, seeing what the marketplace looks like now, I completely overpaid for this book. I could not find it anywhere. Basically, the reason why, from what I can gather, John Nolan took this book out of publication. So if you want an original printing of it, it actually is one with a black cover, completely out of print. You gotta go to eBay, and eBay has editions out there for hundreds of dollars, if not even up to $1,000, if you want that copy. And John Nolan took it out of print because he was thinking it was kind of a danger to have those words out there in the open. Like he was giving away too much and showing how you can elicit information. And he wasn't really comfortable with the idea that he almost gave a playbook of sorts to anyone who reads. Anyone can check it out. So by his own permission, he requested the publisher, please stop producing it and selling it to the public. And he did. And that stood the test of time for some years. But now there's a new round. This white-covered edition has been making the rounds. And like I said, when I saw these available at drastically less than the huge black-covered prices, I picked one up. But now, you can get one for $5. So, they're more plentifully available now than they used to be just last summer. So now that the table is set, what are we talking about here? We can take from this one aspect, which would be the spy route. How to garner information that you want from another. It also takes the form of the opposite. We flip it right over. How to prevent your information from leaking out to another. And Nolan discusses these and more principles here in this book. But he also tries to give you the ethical methods to go about doing this. He's not condoning bypassing your target's security, knock them out on top of the head, ransack their office, and steal the information. He discusses ways that you can figure it out. The information that's being hidden, but do it in lawful ways. Now let me tell you something. It's not an easy topic to discuss here like in a book review. Because there's no story that we're following. There's no plot. There's no protagonist or antagonist. And there is no true resolution. It's just what is. Now in this book, he separates this narrative into 3 sections. Part 1, eliciting the information that you want and need. Part 2, business intelligence collection. And Part 3, protection. And I'll go through all 3 of those parts. Now, before Nolan gets into the nitty-gritty, he gets to whet our appetites for what is to come and why it is important. He prefaces the similarity between intelligence gathering and sharks. He says sharks have a dark shaded top and a light shaded bottom when they're swimming. It allows them to camouflage and blend in when sneaking up and attacking their prey. Intelligence professionals, likewise, need to disguise their motives and tactics when they come after their target. Sharks, if they bite a human, bite once and leave. Intelligence professionals, likewise, shouldn't use up a source. Take a nip of the information and get out of there. You may need to come back later for other information, so you want to keep it intact and a source. Sharks are attracted to the color of emergency yellow, ironically. Just as intelligence professionals are attached and attracted to the color green. They follow the money. Sharks will eat almost anything. License plates, tree stumps, diseased fish. And no matter what they eat, they themselves do not get sick. So, likewise, intelligence professionals need to consume all information. Just prodigious amounts of it. And before it is digested, before it is digested in the analytical process, and only then would they determine what is actually detritus or things to be discarded. And there's many other examples of, sharks and intelligence professionals, but I'll just leave it there for the moment and continue on down the road. He further illustrates the importance of knowing what you're looking for with an anecdote about Dwight D. Eisenhower. And in this anecdote, Eisenhower tells a colonel, this is around the time of World War II, he tells a colonel to get information all about how they could land forces on the south of France no later than the summer of 1944. And the colonel leaves, and 6 months later comes back with a ton of information. Tidal studies on the high and the low tides and how they affect their greater rivers. A review of the forested areas and how they may be navigated or unable to be marched through. A description of all the different languages in the area and their dialects, the ones that would be important to know. Historic studies of past conflicts and how the armies traversed the area in an effort to get to the next engagement. Just facts galore. And at the end of it, all true information, but nothing about what was necessary. So he sends him away. He then goes and gets to another colonel and gives him the same assignment. But instead of just jumping up and getting out there, the colonel starts asking questions. He's a seasoned professional in intelligence gathering and all things of that nature. He asks about the military forces that the Axis has to use against the Allies in the region. Where are their training grounds? What type of equipment do they have? Who leads the troops? And what his history of warfare might be. Do they have insight into the morale of the troops that are stationed at the landing site? Things to get to the heart of what type of information the president may need. So that information is what you would call useful. And every time the second colonel came back with more information, they went through it and perhaps refined to try to figure out what other information we now need that can further be gathered and used for the proper purpose. And that is what intelligence gathering is all about. You don't perform business in a vacuum. You need to know what other businesses are doing, what obstacles that even they had to surmount, what regulations they need to follow. And it's not only just for competitors, it's for the entire business landscape. Now, knowing what your competitors are doing is certainly necessary to know and digest internally, but the world is vast and large. Information is necessary. As Sherlock Holmes has said, data, 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 I cannot make bricks without clay. So John Nolan also brings us along his journey by peppering in various stories to highlight the concepts along the way. Early on, he talks about a typewriter salesman. He's actually got a very good typewriter product that he's trying to sell. It was German manufactured, has a longer warranty than what's out there in the marketplace, and lasted longer than more popular models currently being sold. But apparently the typewriter sales industry isn't very easy. And from time to time, he would be able to win some business if someone actually called him saying, hey, I need typewriters, come talk to me. Or possibly if he was able to go toe-to-toe in like a product showdown and then demonstrate to people on a site, then they would choose his and buy from him. And the company this man worked for literally had no marketing budget. So it was entirely up to this salesman to drum up the sales. So one day, while for a mid-morning coffee, he spots a rival IBM typewriter salesman. And the man the regular salesman had already made like 4 to 5 calls that day, and he was just taking a break. But he sees this IBM guy coming in, and it looks to him like he's just starting his day. It's like 10 or 11 in the morning. So, being curious, this salesman follows the IBM salesman out of the coffee shop and follows him to where he does business. And he sees him go inside, retrieve his messages from his secretary, then goes into his office, kicks his feet up on the desk, and starts making his own calls from the messages the secretary had given him. I mean, the IBM guy is living the salesman's life. The business was coming to him. And like I said, it's only 11 o'clock in the morning right now. The regular guy's been up there for hours now trying to make calls, trying to make sales. So, trying to find out this IBM guy's secrets, he follows him to his sales calls and just watched him unload a bunch of machines on people's businesses, just making sales. So then our man gets the idea. He calls up those same businesses directly. See if he can drop off a machine with them. Let the Steno pool use his machine for a trial period. A true apples-to-apples comparison, on-site, side-by-side. And sure enough, he's finding out that he's actually getting more sales himself. He's able to leech off an opponent in the industry just by finding out what the opponent's client base was like. As time goes on, and the tactic worked, the salesman started to not wait until the next day and call potential clients. He started to go right into those offices as soon as the IBM salesman left. And then he started getting a little bit more chutzpah, and he would almost follow the salesman in through the front door. So the IBM salesman would chat with the receptionist, and then later on move further indoors, chatting with the purchasing manager. And while he's in there with the purchasing manager, this guy would then start talking to the receptionist, just dogging his heels. Well, again, being a little bit stretching too far too fast, it made for a few chance encounters when actually the two men would bump into each other outside the purchasing manager's office. And soon, the reason for IBM's lost sales started to emerge. Where before, there was no way to determine why it was occurring. The fact that this guy was going in so far behind the other guy's heels, and he bumps into him, boom, must be you. So, there may be some danger in using the intelligence that you gather, especially when you don't hide the source of where you got it in the first place. This opens up what would later be known as counterintelligence work. So with this anecdote ended, it brings up some important features that need to be stated. And these things need to be importantly understood. Intelligence doesn't come through some expensive or sophisticated process. Intelligence pays large dividends. Intelligence collection doesn't necessarily involve scads of people. Small companies can collect it and use it just as well as large companies. And finally, once you've got it, protect it. Just as you would protect anything else that would help you increase sales and profits. So this now brings us into section 1. Eliciting the information you want and need. The section is composed of 7 chapters over the first, say, 100 pages of the book. And it has sections, these are the titles of the sections in there. Transfer intelligence community techniques to the commercial sector for competitive advantage. What good does it do to ask questions? Exploding old myths and succeeding at elicitation. Human characteristics in elicitation. Who is most susceptible to elicitation, and who is supposedly most immune. Your first 6-pack of elicitation techniques, and then your second 6-pack of elicitation techniques. But first, let me put out a question which you might have right now. What is elicitation? A Google search comes up with an AI overview answer, which states, elicitation is a structured, often subtle, communication method designed to extract specific information from people during conversation, without making them feel interrogated. Simply put, there is a methodology. There is a methodology in which you can entice a person, or psychologically speaking, to get someone to want to provide information. And it's usually done in such a way that the person giving the information doesn't actually feel that they are giving you the information. I gotta jump back to an example from Chase Hughes to illustrate this. He often tells a story about walking into like a Barnes & Noble and finding a person maybe stocking the bookshelves and trying to find out what they make per hour. Okay, this could also be done with a person in the grocery store or any other similar type business. And a simple thing was, how can I find out what they make per hour without asking them what they make per hour? So it could be something as simple as, hey, excuse me, can you help me find something? And then they do. Oh, thanks, that was very helpful. Hey, I was just reading an article. It says that employees of whatever company it is, employees of here have a high satisfaction rate of working here. And they just raised the minimum wage for all employees to $22 an hour. That must be so exciting for you. And the person would usually respond, I don't know what you're talking about. I make the minimum wage of like $15.92 an hour. So You didn't ask them directly how much they make. They could not want to answer a kind of question so directly from a stranger. I mean, that can seem personal. But there is a psychological theory that people feel the necessity to correct the record. In this example, you said those employees were making $22 an hour. And the person felt the need to let you know that the true answer is something different. So this is one illustration of how you can use elicitation. You say something to somebody, they feel the need to give you information back in such a way. Now, intelligence operations in general have been going back for millennia in time. There's nothing new in this prospect. Now, they even talk about it in the Catholic Bible. Now, you don't have to believe in the Bible or just to see that the writing is giving you the concept. In the Old Testament, there's a scene where Moses sends Joshua and 12 men, 12 spies, into Canaan. And further, he sends 2 people into Jericho. In Jericho, the 2 men start working with a harlot named Rahab. Now, the harlot can gather a whole ton of pillow talk, and that information can help Joshua, the intelligence gathering. And in turn, they promise Rahab that in return for her information, they will protect her and her family in the event of an Israelite invasion into Jericho. And this shows us some elements that still exist today. The use of an operational cover, the use of a safe house, the necessity of bona fides, or bona fides as people call it, the suggestion of a counterintelligence service, the use of a secrecy agreement between the agent and the intelligence officer who's running the agent, and the use of an escape and evasion plan. Using these techniques, you can apply them to any situation in the contemporary world, enough to get information for you from someone else. Now, when using elicitation to try to gather information from another person or a target or however you want to call them, the demeanor and the attitude of the one doing the elicitation is very, very important. Generally speaking, one would need to be innocuous, friendly, not afraid to say a misstatement, curious, but at least within bounds. The conversation would have to be one that's casual and non-threateningly curious. But most important, the elicitator, when talking to a target, would need to suppress their own egos. Of these conversations, anyone that's being happened, the elicitator is not there to win the conversation. You know, people have a tendency, should I say, of trying to one-upmanship one person to another. They say something, you say something a little bit more than that. You know, stockbrokers, I got $1 million on a trade. Well, I got $2 million on a trade. In these instances, you almost have to do one-downmanship. You've got to make the target feel comfortable. Let them be one-upping you. You got to get them into a place of comfort that they want to tell you the information. It's a dance. It's not a wrestling match that you need to win. Because you, the elicitator, you win by gathering the target's or source's information. I mean, as the elicitator, you can always restore your ego later when you're using that information for your firm's own benefit. So it's a very friendly, placating dance that you're doing with these people. Now, while you can go about this in a nonchalant manner, it may require a bit of pre-planning. If you know the target of your information gathering, you may have to do some homework first. You have to plan the conversation. You may have to address the introvert differently from the extrovert. Because, don't forget, what you're trying to do is manipulate your target to giving up the goods. Then once you know how you're going to plan into it, you got to shape the conversation. You got to figure out what your objective is and determine what might be milestones along the path to achieving that objective. Secondly, you might need to determine what techniques may be used to achieve this. And lastly, there's a structure the conversation might need to follow. And some of this goes back to not letting the target realize that they are a target. There's a psychological theory out there that kind of says people will remember a direct question much longer than just a casual conversation. So, if you need information maybe to get from the target and maybe try to find someone to blackmail them or seduce them or whatever, if you go right up to a person and saying, hey, what's your sex life like? That's very direct. And because it's a personal in nature, it may be avoided by the target immediately. However, if you're sitting next to your target, maybe in a dive bar or somewhere else, and you're watching a football game, and a beer ad comes on, and there's sexy women on the screen, it may divert the conversation into that realm. Preferably it's done by the target. Maybe they make a lewd comment, you come over the top a little bit, or string it along, and you go further. Because there might perhaps be an opening to put something of the nature of, what is your sex life like, in the conversation, provided that that was information that you needed. If it's superfluous and unnecessary, you may want to avoid it 100%. But because it came from football game, beer ad, subtopic, it might come across naturally, and therefore it wouldn't be a need to be remembered by the target because you didn't ask them about it directly. Subtlety, of course, being the name of the elicitor's game. So the structure of the conversation would help to hide the elicitation. And the book kind of calls it an hourglass structure. You know, you start the conversation with the wide part of the hourglass, macro level topics. Then that hourglass filters in to the narrow spout. That's where the information you're searching for is going to be. And you apply your techniques and you get what you need. But once you get what you need, you then come back out to the bottom of the hourglass. You got to bring the focus back to the mundane, back to the macro level. And this hides the traces of your steps. And it keeps the memory of the conversation, even in the target's background. Makes it a dull noise just not to be listened to. So, talking about the weather, finding out about something with the company, back out to the weather again, is a very simple way to discuss it that way, because you're just being blasé. It's like you never talked about anything important in the middle. You've been talking about the weather and the fact that it's icy outside and there's snow coming tomorrow. Now, the whole process of elicitation actually goes a few steps further. You got to tap into the target's motivations. If you can get some of what they are looking for to be a reason why they're talking to you, getting the information out of them might be easier. So, if you approach someone that has some of the following, this could assist your efforts. Fulfilling a desire for recognition. Okay, which is about as easy as it sounds. If you give someone an ego boost in what they're doing well, or what they deserve to be spotlighted on, it provides an in to their minds. Tendencies towards self-effacement. What he calls the "aw shucks" or the "twernt nothing" response. People who do not want the spotlight. People who, rarely enough, are not egomaniacs and will defer to being blessed with talent and I'm just glad I can help out. They may also go about telling you how easy the project was that they're working on. And then they'll go into detail. The details you wanted to find out about the project that they might have worked on. There's the need to correct the record, and I discussed that a little bit before. The need to prove someone else wrong. Like the tendency to correct the record, it gets you talking about someone else that they want to talk about. And if there's anything negative they can throw in there, they'll do it. People can sometimes have a tendency to talk about things that don't concern them. If it's another division's project, telling what they know doesn't hurt them in their job, so why not share it? The lack of listening ears in the world. Your bartender types, your psychologists or psychiatrists, that's where they come into play. When people don't have ears to hear what they have to say, you being there, they might tell you. Especially if they are chronically dissatisfied or situationally dissatisfied. But some people are just the gossipers. Some people just can't keep a secret. There's some people who underestimate the value of what they know, or their tendency to think that the recipient of the information just wouldn't understand it if they told them anyway. There are also those who just want to be recognized by an expert in the field. And this dovetails a little bit into the desire for recognition, but it just takes it from a slightly different angle. One that we may relate to differently from the being noticed section. And there are even other characteristics as well, but that was a nice list of the types of people who, if you grasp onto their motivations, they may have a plethora of information for you. On the who to target list, there's a whole section about those here too. And they're all equally susceptible. So for instance, you need information about a company, talk to the factory workers. People who may underestimate the value of the project that they are building, and therefore might not know that the things that they do know are important to the competitor. Things like the layout of the factory, how it goes from step A to step B, step C, maybe in an assembly line. Or the power of a certain motor that's used along the way. Maybe even the capacity of the supplies they consume. These are things that are information that can be used by someone looking for them. Besides factory workers, you can find some minor government officials. Basically the underling who probably never gets attention, never gets a kind word, they never get recognition. Someone who may be ignored on the daily by the major government officials. Professors. The scholars who just want to pontificate their knowledge of things. And they want to say these things to those that they believe couldn't understand it without their insight and clarity of the knowledge that they're professing. And then you have sales and marketing types. People who like to brag about their accomplishments anyway. So why wouldn't they throw a couple of nuggets of information in there that are important for you? Now, you might think you get the most problems with, say, lawyers or doctors. And they talk about that here too. However, most problems doesn't mean that you'd be unsuccessful getting information from these types. It will still require a plan of the conversation when you start it and structuring it and whatnot. And then you come about with that proper of the shaping of the conversation to see if you can find the right motivation of even a doctor or of even a lawyer. They are not immune. And like I said in the titles, there's then the last two chapters are 12 different techniques that you can employ in the elicitation process. Which I'm not going to lay out here for you right now, I'm sorry. I feel the video is going to be long enough to begin with, So, like I said at the beginning, this book does not have a story to follow per se. You don't see the main character move from scene to scene. It's a business text, and it kind of lays out some of the tricks of the trade. Well, that brings us on to the second section of the book. And the next 90 pages take us through the business intelligence collection. Those chapters are Intelligence for Decision Makers, Operational Business Intelligence, Actually Doing It, Intelligence Begins at Home, Internal Source, Who They Are and How to Find Them, The World Can Be Your Oyster, External Sources, Who They Are and How to Find Them, Trade Show/Conference Intelligence Operations, Getting the Most for Your Already Heavy Investment, and then Developing Personality and Psychological Profiles of Business Rivals. So that whole first section, the first 100 pages, was all about the tools and the techniques. But it didn't have any context. And nothing exists without context. There are elements that need to be addressed, or at a minimum, understood in the process. And John Nolan breaks that down into broad categories of competitor intelligence, consumer intelligence, technical intelligence, and legislative or regulatory intelligence. And by the way, all of those four have an offsetting counterintelligence component to them as well. Now, there's a description in here regarding the intelligence cycle, and it's dovetailed into a business intelligence model and what it requires. And the model has separate, discrete elements. Tasking is one. The information that is of particular concern to the decision maker. Think back to the Dwight Eisenhower illustration from the introduction. Collection objectives. You have your overall task now, and that can be broken down further into major elements. And those elements can be broken down further into specific questions. And those questions can be more manageable to orchestrate. The collection activities. The sources, the secondary sources, maybe even published information. You may need to identify, contact, and employ those human sources with those human resources with the most up-to-date and reliable information. That's your target. Process and report the raw information, which is the kind of flow-through of the information you find. And then analysis. That's the digesting aspect of the information gathering. Because you may have some established assumptions. And here, it would be important to find data that supports it or goes against it. But always be on the lookout that they don't focus the data collected to those prevailing assumptions. Let the data point to itself, not the want of what assumptions or thoughts that you originally made, and make that the conclusion. So to clarify that as much as I can, there's an old Shakespearean idiom. Don't make the wish the father of the thought. And not to be falsely quoting it, the quote is actually, "Thy wish was father, Harry, to that thought." And it may have come from Henry IV. So don't let things naturally come to what you want to happen. Let it come to where it needs to go. Your assumptions may need to change. And then once you've gone through the analysis, there's the reporting and the dissemination, where you report your results back to the decision maker. And all of this, that entire process, does not have to be a one-cycle process. It can be gone through and reported, and then the task might get refined, and then you go through it again. It's what you do with the information that you have collected. Also, being alert that the information that has been collected is not misinformation. And that leads us to the different intelligence needs. And they have to be satisfied sometimes at different levels along the way. Like the lower you go into an organization, the less time you have to utilize all these tools and techniques. But as you abstract on lower and lower levels, the information you gather may not be anywhere near as strategic as those you can get from the higher levels. And through this, you may find that the efforts that you're going through and are only for, they call it, I guess, the strategic notion of the week. It's an acronym SNOW, strategic notion of the week. Basically, if your organization is only concerned with quarterly reporting or earnings projections, that means the focus is only cyclical and short-term centered. So when you go to certain sources that are involved with that aspect of the company, you're only looking at a couple months out. 3 max, if it's quarterly. So it's the kind of thing of saying, who are you talking to and what is their need or what they have? If it's building a new plant to have a new product line, that's a longer focus, a longer term thing that has to be discussed. But it's just about how can we get sales up 1% this quarter. You know, you'll get that information possibly, but it won't be as useful as the long-term stuff. And the next few try this one more time. The next few sections give us an overview with some good details of where the data is that you need. It starts out simply. You need the internal sources. The information you need is inside the firm that you're looking for. But there's also external sources. Areas that involve public announcements or regulatory commissions where information may be freely available. And where it is true, once you hear that something is in a publication, congratulations. You just learned the same thing which anyone else who can read has already figured out. However, the public information on its face says what might be happening in the future. But public information provides you even more than that if you know how to look. It can also provide you with sources, which then you may elicit information from them. And that's where you need to strategize a focus upon. If there is a PR person that makes these announcements, that's the one you have to talk to. And maybe get into that organization through her a better way. You may get a lead on certain service providers or vendors that the company uses. People that they use for parts, maintenance, sanitation. Maybe a biohazard or toxic removal agency. You can get from either the internal or the external their customers. Do they utilize collections agencies, let's say, for delinquent receivables? That can allow you to know there's another level. It's not just the receivables department of the company. They use an outsourced collections agency. Maybe you can get through the collection agency information you want. By that, you might be able to find the people you're trying to collect from. Then interview them, elicit from them, get information from that source. You can go to competitors. Because odds are, someone who worked for company A at the time, for a time, could have left their employee and now works for company B. So at company B, you may have resources to learn about company A. So competitors have the same employees over time amongst each other. And even government sources, things that you might be able to discern with a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request, that could prove invaluable. Who they give 1099s to, that's information you might be able to find out. That's a government source. And where you may want to start your investigations, there's plenty of available data if you have the ability to find it. There's data in human resources, in finance and accounting, in the operations, membership lists, sales. The options are out there if you have the ability to get inside. And then there's a whole section of what you might uncover during trade shows. It's actually amazing to hear all the ways you may talk, either directly with your target you're looking for, or by strolling through the competitives of your target at trade shows. It's the need to advertise that gets the trade show salesman in a very talkative mood. If they can give you a piece of information that entices you, or makes the sale, or makes the promising connection, they won't hesitate to clue you in. And you can leverage the competitors for this information as well. Because the competitors have been performing their own intelligence gathering on the same company that you're trying to get it from. So, that is section 2 for you. And finally, we've reached the final section. Protection. This is where we deal with counterintelligence. And this takes us through the final 90 pages of the text, not counting the interesting appendices that are attached at the end of this work. This section has chapters such as operational counterintelligence, keeping score, and keeping them out. Who are those guys? And why are they doing such terrible things to us? It's a great title. Just how vulnerable are you to your rivals' collection activities? Test yourself and attack yourself. Develop countermeasures for your dining and dancing pleasure. Misinformation, disinformation, and deception. And putting it all together. And let's start here with a definition. Corporate counterintelligence. Active measures, sometimes taken in conjunction with federal agencies, undertaken to identify and neutralize the intelligence collection activities of a business rival. So in that kind of a definition, active measures as opposed to passive ones. Active as opposed to reactive. Looking forward instead of backwards chaining in investigations. And the federal agencies? Well, there's the Espionage Act of 1996, which criminalizes the theft or misappropriation of trade secrets, signed into law by President Clinton on October 11th, 1996. It targets both foreign economic espionage and domestic trade secret theft. And then the last part of that definition, identify and neutralize aspects of this. Again, we're not talking about spy versus spy. Neutralizing is not assassinating. It's to disable or prevent someone's ability to injure you or your organization before they get a chance to do so. So there's what to protect, how to protect it, and how long to protect it. Now, much of these chapters go into details surrounding, like, what is a threat? They even have a formula here. You can determine it. It's subjective, but there is a formula. And the formula is capability plus indicators equals threat. Does my competitor really have the capability to perform corporate business intelligence activities? Do they have a department for this? Do they have the resources for this? Or is it a little mom and pop shop down the road? Does my competitor have the intent to perform it? What indicators do we have that they really mean business? And that's how you can discern if you have a threat. And then, obviously, you'll need to assess those capabilities and those indications that you found to come up with your threat assessment. There's also the likelihood that you will have to assess and perhaps take steps to add levels to the following: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Now, this may be used either offensively or defensively. You can actually poison the well of the opposition, either against them, or in a way to have them eat their own young, in which case you win. And this can be done by sowing uncertainty between partners or between the company and their suppliers. There are ways that you and your company can promote a competing product, which doesn't actually exist. But the promotions of said product are leaked to the competitor. And this may force them to go into production early when they're not ready, or to spend more capital to get their item to market. And that could be detrimental to them more than it would have been an asset. So there's some sneaky stuff around here. Then there's also a section on how to counterintelligence yourself. You try to find out how you can determine any leaks or deficiencies in controls or anything else that you have internally and try to clean them up. And there are any number of ways that's laid out in this book to do just such that. So there you have it. That's the overall for you of the 3 sections of this book from John Nolan. Now I understand I took the majority of this and my descriptions at a 30,000 foot overview approach. There's a ton of pragmatic, practical, real world applications, as well as their consequences, to everything that's laid out in this text. Like I said at the beginning, this stuff is just a newly raised hobby of mine right now. And I really can't absorb enough of this information. And also, since books like this are technical in nature, I'm just not capable of fully absorbing it through one read-through setting. And that's why I'm glad to do this here, like this video. I had to go through the book again and rehash it for my mind and for my notes. I had to leaf through the dog-eared pages that I made where there was something interesting on that page I wanted to remember specifically. And then just go through all the elements of it that led up to that point and came afterwards. I know more about this book in my second go-through now to do my notes than I think I did when I read through it the first time. The first time I was in awe. But overall, I gotta think that I gave you, in my personality today, when I'm going through all this data and giving you this video, that I was excited for this book. I actually want you to go out and get this book for yourself. I can almost see some of the dangers that the author was trying to address when he attempted to take a book out of publication, out of circulation. And some of this stuff, in practice, may seem, unethical. He made a strong impression with this data that he hoped, prayed to keep it legal, with an emphasis to try not to use it for ill. Just as there are ways that you may be able to learn more about what you want from someone else, but most importantly, to recognize if you see someone trying to get information from you. So, go out, find your copy today. Like I said, I think I see nowadays on eBay, you can get one for $5, shipped. It's totally worth that. Totally worth that. Small price. Buy one, and then buy another one and give it to a friend of yours. But that's what I have for you today. I'm at 54 minutes. Not too bad. I want to thank you for watching it through this far. I hope with this information and the way I've presented it to you, that perhaps I've earned your subscription to this channel. I would appreciate it if you might be able to do so. Otherwise, cheers, and I'll see you back when I do my next review. Bye-bye now.